spent a lot of time talking together about terrifying things within the Star Wars galaxy, from Star Weirds and Sith Wraiths to the Nal-Nal and the creatures roaming the lowest levels of Coruscant. Today, however, we'll be focusing on a technology, specifically nanoviruses. Theoretically, nanoviruses in Star Wars require only one thing: for the victim to be infected by some sort of very small machine, then transformed into a cybernetic husk, while losing at least some form of bodily autonomy. Practically, however, nanotech in Star Wars is not very advanced or widespread. The best example of traditional nanotechnology I can think of is the Fizz nanotechnology, which presented as organic acid, but which actually could target threats to whichever planet it resided on. The Fizz is described by Master Silgal as being advanced far beyond the technologies of the Galactic Alliance. Because of this, practical application of a nanovirus almost always, if not always, required use of the dark side of the Force. This brings us to Sith Technobeasts, and let's turn to the new essential guide of droids, which sums up the terrifying creatures. I've condensed some of the information for you. Technobeasts are true Sith abominations. Their very existence is proof of the evils perpetuated during the New Sith Wars, when dark side magicians strove to pervert the balance of the Force. The Sith developed the ability mechu to allow for force control over mechanical systems. Sith Lord Belaya Darzu delved deeper, creating technology that hungered, the Technovirus seed. The entry explains that those infected with the Technovirus seed would essentially have their organic matter turned into circuitry. What's truly terrifying is that what started out as a small spore, upon touch, would quickly transform organic tissue into machinery, growing into the size of a fist-shaped tumor in minutes as the virus moved through veins, replacing them with electronics, as the virus eventually lobotomized the host. At this point, of course, the Technovirus had full control over the victim, thus creating a Technobeast. And the key of the Technobeast is a combination of the mastery of Sith mechu technology control and a propagating virus, itself powered by the dark side of the Force. Together, the technique of creating the Technovirus seed and controlling Technobeasts themselves was known as mechu vitae. Post-lobotomy, Technobeasts would replace limbs with pincers, saws, and blades, while also covering their flesh with armor and growing weapons like blasters, essentially turning them into zombie cyborgs. And at this point, I should note that it wasn't only humans or humanoids that could be transformed, but even larger creatures. And theoretically, at least, there's no max size, so just imagine a Technobeast exogorth. Spores, or at least presumably those created by a single Sith, were somehow linked to each other, giving the beasts a form of group consciousness. And once an individual was infected, the spore not only reproduced for the purpose of control, but also further disease propagation. An infected Technobeast would produce new seeds which could be released in spore form, infecting any within range. So if you could somehow move the spore to a civilized planet, you would have an ever-expanding, totally subservient army under your control. And once the disease had progressed to the point of total control, it was irreversible, and the only way to prevent a full infection upon exposure was the use of certain intravenous chemicals, as was the case with Darth Bane, or the use of the Force. So, as I alluded to earlier, an army of Technobeasts could be tied to the will of the person who created the seed. Bane discovered, hundreds of years after their creator's death, that an army of Technobeasts, which had previously been used to wage a war, still remained even after the death of their creators. They weren't, however, in the best of state, with, I quote, most of their living tissue having since rotted and fallen away. What remained were desecrated strands of skin and sinew clinging to bone, supported and held together by rods, wires, and twisted scraps of metal. What remained of their brains had been kept alive by the nanogenes of the Technovirus, but the inevitable long-term degradation had impaired their motor skills and reduced them to shells of shambling, mummified metal. And this, to me, is one of the most terrifying aspects of the Technobeast. After infection, it's not really clear what happens to you. your consciousness. The Technobeast destroys your frontal lobes, but the rest of your brain should remain intact, and it seems like the machine or the cyborg that you become actually somewhat relies on your brain to function. Still, you're under the control of a Darksider and will typically be thrown into battle, or perhaps just left to shamble along for eternity. Still, even in their poor state, where the Technobeasts were essentially powerless shells, the army still took over an hour for Bane to destroy, and on a few occasions actually threatened the Sith Lord. Ultimately though, Technobeasts were just one expression of Sith spawn, a technique which saw beings warped by the dark side, ultimately to serve a Sith master at the cost of their autonomy. Similarly, they were only one expression of mecha deru. Many Sith, like Chronal, focused on furthering his skills in other areas of the technique, especially in machine control. There are also, of course, many other disturbing technologies in Star Wars Legends. One of the better known ones is Entekment, which basically uses a being's life force for energy to power a machine. But to me at least, the body horror of becoming a Technobeast puts it up to the #1 slot. That is, however, just my opinion. What do you think? What do you think of the idea of becoming a Technobeast, the Technovirus seed, and what the most disturbing technology in Star Wars actually is? Let me know all of that and more down in the comments. Today's question of the day comes from Michael, who asks, where is this footage from? This is of course Battle of the Dreadnoughts, the short film that E.C. Henry and I worked on. It was a labor of love, so if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner. Please do, please. Anyway, until next time guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. Hope you're having a great week. As always, may the Force be with you.